Greetings again, curious acolytes of the Force, and welcome back to the archives. As many of you know, we have begun our deep descent into figuring out the truth behind the Grey Jedi. We started off this series by analyzing a few characters, starting with the self-proclaimed Grey Jedi known as Jolee Bindo. For this video though, we have decided to head into the pages of history to figure more about the misconception of Grey Jedi. A popular belief is that Grey Jedi have the ability to use both sides of the Force at will, able to master the light and the dark side in tandem with one another. In our video about why Grey Jedi are stronger than regular Jedi, we debunked this idea. However, our researchers wanted to find out the origin of this misconception, and we believe we know where it came from. Much of what we know about Grey Jedi is skewed due to one Force organization that claimed to know the truth about the Force itself. This group was known as the Gensarai, and we've mentioned it many times throughout the channel, but we haven't really done an in-depth analysis on them. This Force-based organization branched off from the Jedi Order itself sometime before the events of the Clone Wars, with this group being the most commonly associated with the Grey Jedi term, though not all is what it seems. So please join us in this journey into the history and construction of the Gensarai, and how they forever influenced the meaning of Grey Jedi and what this truly was. The history of the Gensarai all start with a young Jedi that was ultimately led astray. The name of this Jedi Knight was Nikos Tyrus. While on a studious search through the Jedi Temple archives, Nikos came across a journal that once belonged to Lardan Noon, who was a follower of the Sith Lord Exar Kun during the Old Sith War. The journal contained Noon's philosophical teachings and opinions on the light as well as dark side of the Force. Within these texts contains Noon's biased accounts of the Second Great Jedi Schism and how this happened. Unfortunately though, the young Jedi Nikos took this as fact and began to believe that the Jedi Order had fallen to the dark side unknowingly. Like many schisms or breaks before, Nikos defected from the Jedi and took with him many followers to form their organization known as the Gensarai. Gensarai, which meant followers of the hidden truth in the Sith pure-blooded language. Using the Journal of Lardan Noon as a sort of guide, Nikos would begin teaching his followers the hidden secrets of the Sith, as they followed a philosophy called the Embrace of the Shadow. It was their belief that they could master both compassion and rage, and call upon them evenly. This was ultimately proven to be false though, and Nikos would unknowingly be leading himself and his followers down the path of the dark side, believing that he could separate the two and become an ultimate power in the universe, a master of the light and the dark, something that we know is nearly impossible, if not completely impossible. As time went on, the Gensarai distanced themselves from the Jedi teachings and formed their order to be structured in a very different manner. Their ranks were Apprentice, Defender, and Sari Kar. Interestingly, there isn't really a knight rank, as apprentices more or less train to jump to master level, which is the Defender. The Sari Kar is basically their leader, or in other terms, their Grandmaster or Emperor. Many Gensarai wield the same color lightsaber as Jedi, that being blue or green, though some have been seen wielding yellow or orange blades. They didn't put as much emphasis on lightsaber construction as they did on armor construction. In accordance with the writings of Lardan Noon, the Gensarai fashioned themselves armor that echoed the armor that was worn by that of the ancient Sith Empire. It was a highly flexible suit of light armor covered in spun cortosis fibers, capable of protecting a Gensarai from glancing lightsaber attacks. The armor had a very basic outline that was inspired by the Sith, but each individual set would be decorated to look something like an animal that the individual Gensarai Defender identified with. In a sense, the very armor and lightsaber reflected their attempt at balance, with the lightsaber itself coming from the beliefs of the Jedi Order and the armor from the days of the ancient Sith Empire. If the wearer was so inclined, modifications to the armor included systems designed to better emulate the creature in question, such as even built-in macro binoculars or even retractable claws. The construction of the armor was a deeply personal affair, and was as much of an art form as lightsaber construction was, requiring just as much dedication and attention to detail as well as skill. Used in the Gensarai is this transition from apprentice to the rank of Defender. As far as their teachings and doctrine goes, they do claim to be able to possess and both access the light and dark side powers. Lardan Noon had gone into exile after the war, and his journal delved into both the light and dark aspects of the Force in conjunction interaction with one another. One of the major themes within Nune's writings was the concept of integrating the shadow. To fully grasp the Sith's secrets within the manuscript required a great understanding of the Force, an understanding that the early Genseri simply did not possess, as again they stemmed from a young Jedi Padawan. The group could master no more than the very basics of what the manuscript detailed, as much of it was deep Sith doctrine. Furthermore, advancement in the arts of the Sith required turning to the dark side fully, which is not what the Genseri preached. While some Genseri were unconsciously turning to the dark side and accepting this as a new way of life, there were others that were subconsciously resisting this change. Genseri were exceptionally strong when they fought, as they held the values of the Jedi, but still used the aggression of the dark side. This made them exceptionally dangerous on the battlefield. Because of their inability to really consolidate the light or the dark side of the Force in their powers, they mostly fought with their lightsabers and harnessed the Force more internally, making them some of the greatest duelists of the era. The Genseri fight fast and hard without ever surrendering, and can be very dangerous in small groups, especially when trapped in a corner. However, they dedicate themselves to protecting their own and the inhabitants of their own planet, and will only fight if provoked. Again, a holdover from the Jedi Order. What's unique about the Genseri and these Grey Jedi is they believe that they are the truest form of the Jedi, and that the new, more modern Jedi were infected by the ways of the Sith. And in all of the history books, there was actually one single major engagement between the Jedi and the Genseri. This provocation came when a group of Jedi Knights would stumble across Nikos and a few other Genseri defenders or masters. Believing them to be Sith cultists, the Jedi engaged the Genseri in a fierce battle, which resulted in Nikos' defeat and his ultimate death. Learning of this great tragedy, the wife of one of the Genseri that were slain took up the mantle as the new Sarai Kar, and she ultimately believed that the Jedi had fully embraced the dark side and were just murderers, with the origin of the Jedi and their legacy now passing to the Genseri. However, with the loss of their leader in Nikos, also came the loss of Lara Nude's journal. Without it, the Genseri actually managed to sway themselves back to the light side, and do so over the course of several years. The Genseri lived through the Clone Wars as well as even the Galactic Civil War, and they even met Luke Skywalker's newly formed Jedi Order. While tensions were high in the beginning, eventually Luke got the Genseri to see that the Order had been remade, and they became allies once more. The Grey and the Light united. So what can we learn from the Genseri in this tale? Well, this lets us know a few important things. 1. The dark side can corrupt those even if they do not realize it, so using Sith teachings in any capacity can lead down the dark side. However, one who tries to use both compassion and rage will find themselves completely unable to fully embrace either the dark side or the light, and can only use it on a very surface level. The Genseri are echoing proof of what we found out about Darth Gravid. Jedi and Sith teachings cannot coexist in one being. They do not meld. The balance of the light and dark must be just that, a balance. One cannot master both sides of the Force. It's literally impossible. One can only master the light, or the dark, or the balance. The Genseri meant well, and luckily, they didn't do a whole lot of harm before Nikos was killed. They were a faction of confused Force sensitives that ultimately had been lied to. They believed that the true way of the Force was to use the light side, but with ingraining Sith teachings, which simply cannot happen. In this way, we can classify them as Grey Jedi, though they also missed out on what a lot of the other Grey Jedi orders have found out. It was only until their order was reborn around the time of Nikos' death did they bring themselves back to the center, though we aren't told whether or not they ultimately ever found this true balance of the Force. So my friends, what is your takeaway from the Genseri? Many of you have theorized that this was the origin of the idea of the Grey Jedi. Unfortunately though, these Force users just didn't have all of the information despite calling themselves the followers of truth. However, there are other orders and individuals out there that proclaim that they are indeed Grey Jedi, and we would love to open a manuscript and explore that in the future. As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching as our search continues to form the truth of the Grey Jedi. May the Force be with you in all of its forms, and have a great day.